Welcome back to another episode of Franky D. Crafter. This week we're doing October. Yeah, I know I missed it completely, but I don't need an excuse to do some orc builds. I found myself thinking I can destroy this toy to make some orc terrain. I was talking to my good friend from Scratch Bashing about what we should make for this year, and he ended up making an amazing orkmek. I have always wanted to make a series of projects where I made pieces of almost like forgotten technology or forgotten relics from a past era, where maybe magic wasn't the main source of progression, and instead it was like robotic technology, almost like tapping into an alternate reality where I can build terrain for Warhammer and just use it for my DnD sessions. And I sort of already started with the series with another project I recently made, so check that one out after the video. I may have a lot of things you might have to check out for this video. Well, let's get into it. The start to this project was the most fun, but also the most dangerous. Taking this thing apart was almost therapeutic. I actually used most of these pieces that I rip off later in the project. I felt like I destroyed enough of the project, so it was time to glue things together. This thing would make a great orc jaw. Oh, remember when I said I was done destroying?
I lied.
Okay, maybe I should relax and stop with this toy violence. The biggest obstacle I face in this project is trying to figure out how I'm gonna stick all this crap together. I think I pretty much try everything, starting with screws. My favorite thing about orc builds is this kind of project gives me the excuse to use scraps I've collected that I would normally not use in a medieval setting. I tend to play in a very fantasy setting. Putting stuff like this down on my table doesn't take away from the experience. It's already so fantasy. This is just another aspect. It actually helps a lot with the world building. Another cool thing is that I get to mess with a lot of giant weapons and guns. The best thing about all of these is that most of these scraps and plastics are pretty much free. Oh, and just in case I forget to mention, I'm also using Gorilla Construction Adhesive. It's my favorite and most trusted glue. Starting this project was all over the place, but once I got into a rhythm, it was all smooth sailing from there. At this point, it felt like a puzzle where I had all the pieces. I just had to figure out where all of them went. I use aluminum for some areas to add filler, but later I make a mistake that I'll talk about it when I make it. I start to add teeth like spikes to give it more of that orc look. To be honest, I don't know if I achieved it, but I'm still happy with how it's all coming together. I use hot glue in some areas, but just as a temporary thing. I go back to all of those areas and reinforce them with other material, plaster or Gorilla Glue. Hot glue doesn't hold very well over time, and I tend to not depend on it too much. I start to look around for bits I can use to add details, and I come across a lot of caps. And this is where I make my aluminum mistake. It wasn't a terrible mistake, but one worth mentioning. I use the aluminum as a means to glue the cap, just to get more surface area to make contact with the project. But the aluminum isn't solid and it can come apart. So that's just what happened. In some places it did fall apart. I had to come back and glue everything back, but I mean, everything is 2 caps. One of my favorite areas on this project was actually the bottom half of the body, which obviously wasn't there. I almost wanted this to look like it got gutted. I started to use these Lego pieces. I got a bucket full of unwanted Legos for like $3. I also ordered some small rhinestones that I was supposed to get in the mail this week, but I grew impatient, so I started to use bigger ones. I guess they don't look up to scale, but on one hand it is an orc build, and also it's gonna look good when I paint it, so I don't know. At this point, I start to add bits just to add detail. If you're finding this as therapeutic as I am, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. Let's move on with the project. Let's go. This is a really cool technique I learned from scratch bashing. Use plaster to fill in all the gaps. This also helps reinforce all of the gluing we did. I prime it and then I actually start to put it on a base. I love using bark for cliffs. This process also feels more like a puzzle than it does work. Bark is awesome. This last year alone, I think I made like maybe 10 pieces that all utilize bark. I've used it so much, I feel like I'm becoming a pro at making it look like stone. I'm actually not gluing the mech to the base yet. I want to do some painting before I do. I also want to add some pieces over the mech that I'll only be able to do after I paint both the base and the mech. Once the base is ready, I make it one piece with the sculptor mold. You know the drill, cover it with Mod Podge mix to make sure it's sealed. We'll start with some dry brushing to highlight details and give us a better idea of how to paint this. I use this stage to plan ahead, and recently I'm digging stonework with an orange base tone. I'm actually gonna leave this here and link up a video where I actually go into explaining how I paint the bark, out of the sake of sounding repetitive. This was my first time working with a static grass applicator, and let me tell you, something went wrong. I don't know what went wrong. I'll figure it out with another project, but for now we're stuck with this. My bad. It doesn't look terrible, but it also doesn't look the way I wanted it to look. So I guess let's move on to a different part of the project where I know I won't mess it up. We need to make this look as rusty as possible. This brown is the same brown I used on the ground. That rhymes. This brown is the same brown I used. Anyways, there will be a nice sense of color harmony going on through the project. The cool thing about this rust is that you don't have to try too hard to make it look good. You just have to add a little bit of silver paint here and there. Just make sure you don't get it on the edges. Make sure those stay brown. I have made orc terrain before, but I have one regret. I painted it blue. This time I wouldn't be making the same mistake. I used the perfect red. I applied it just like I applied the silver paint. Just less of it, I guess. I added a bunch of warm colors and called it a day. It was time to finally finish the project, so I glued both of the pieces together. I used a combination of glue, sculpt mold, and more bark to join them together. Alright, it's time for that reveal shot. Well, that was a lot of fun, and I came out with a lot more appreciation for what scratch bashing does. This was a project that kind of took its own form. I had an idea of what I wanted, but I had to work with the material that I had at hand. So I had to build shapes around what I had, which was really cool and really refreshing. It was a breath of fresh air, as they say. And it was nice. Well, like always, thank you so much. Thank all the patrons. I have a challenge coming up next week, and make sure not to miss it by subscribing. You can support the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing the video. And if you could do a little bit more, I do have a Patreon you can check out. If not, check out the merchandise. If anything, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.